And this is life in college football, Mike, where just a few months removed from having one of the more prolific passing offenses in Power 5 football, with a quarterback who is now, after throwing for 3,500 yards, has played himself into an NFL draft situation and an elite receiving core. But two of those three main pieces moving on, all of a sudden you got to rebuild your passing attack, and that goes to wide receiver. But fortunately, you've got the anchor in Cam Phillips.
You do. You have the anchor at Cam Phillips, and, we'll kind of wait and see who's throwing him the football. But, Cam Phillips worked a lot out of the slot last year for the Hokies, really emerged late in the season. He's been a 4-year starter now, or will be a 4-year starter this fall. Hodges and Isaiah Ford out wide. They moved Cam Phillips on the inside, and they had him running a lot out of the slot with C.J. Carroll. Now with Isaiah Ford and Bucky Hodges both heading to the NFL, there's a little more open competition on the outside receiver positions. It's likely that Cam Phillips is going to slide outside and play a little bit more like Isaiah Ford did. Not a huge size difference there, so it's not going to be a huge surprise to see Phillips split out this fall. We've seen it in the past anyway, so it won't be a huge adjustment for him. C.J. Carroll, he's missed spring practice, but he's a guy who's going to figure into the slot receiver rotation like he did this past year. He had a pretty productive year for the Hokies. Didn't catch a ton of passes, but nearly 300 yards receiving. Had a huge catch against Notre Dame to set up the Hokies in Notre Dame territory, in what ended up being a decisive score there to open up the second half in that game. So Carroll's a really reliable receiver. That was kind of a safety valve last year for Gerard Evans, and hopefully he provides the same sort of mentality and the same sort of positional integrity that he provided for the Hokies last year, no matter who the quarterback is. So that leaves a third or fourth wide receiver position open. And there are a number of guys in camp who have made an impact so far. Khalil Pimpleton, a 5'7" true freshman, only about 150 pounds right now. Really, really light, so he better be fast, and he is. He's quick. He's making guys miss. The coaching staffs acknowledge that. The quarterbacks are talking about how elusive he is in the open field. He's a guy who's the heir apparent to C.J. Carroll in the slot, who's going to step in and play receiver down the line for the Hokies out of that position and run a lot of inside routes for Tech. The issue is with Pimpleton is that, he is only 150 pounds. Usually when you see a 5'7" receiver, you're hoping he's pushing 170. Those guys don't get huge, but you're hoping that at least he puts on some weight. And I think that that's going to be the case. My guess right now is that as impressive as Pimpleton has been so far in camp, it's likely that he'll redshirt this fall to put on a little bit more weight. A couple other guys that have been mentioned here in camp, starting with Samuel Denmark. He's another guy who is redshirted, hasn't really found his footing there with the Hokies in the receiving rotation, but could make an impact this fall. He's a bigger receiver, a guy who can step out on the outside and make some plays. He was really impressive on tape coming out of high school, and the coaching staff has always been high on him. It's just going to be a matter on whether or not he picks up the offense well enough, and he's, putting what he's thinking about in his mind about how the plays develop and turning that into speed on the field. If he's able to do that, he's a really impressive-looking receiver that I think could make a difference for the Hokies come the fall. And then a couple other guys, Phil Patterson, redshirted last year, a guy that the coaching staff was really, really pushing hard for 2 years ago when they were recruiting him. Hokies were thrilled to get him, and they're hoping to really get him into the mix. Patterson's a really impressive receiver out of the Virginia Beach area, a guy that's elusive in the open field. Not a huge guy, but he can make a lot of different plays. He can really go up and get the ball, too, on the deep ball and the jump ball. He's only about 6'1", but he makes a lot of big-time plays in the open field. So the Hokies are hoping to have him make an impact here as the spring winds up and they head into the fall. And then one other guy who's really been talked about a lot, and he's actually from my area here in Northern Virginia, is Eric Kuma. Eric Kuma actually will be heading into his sophomore season with the Hokies. Didn't see a lot of playing time on the offensive side of the ball last year, was more of a special teams player, but he did see some limited action in the Belk Bowl, specifically when Isaiah Ford left the game briefly. So Kuma's a guy that the coaching staff was really, really excited about heading into last season, thought the rotation ultimately was on the outside looking in, but he performed well enough in practices to find a spot on special teams. And now the coaching staff is raving about his development and how he's turned into a really reliable player for the Hokies on offense. So I think Eric Kuma is a guy we're going to see a lot of on the field offensively for Tech this year, whether it's on the outside, lining up opposite of Cam Phillips, or maybe in the return game as a punter kick returner, which he did a ton of here at local Forest Park High School right up the street from me.
Justin Fuente, a coach who has partially built his reputation on developing passing offenses, and his reputation is going to be put to the test with unknown commodities all over the place at quarterback and wide receiver, aside from, of course, the star Cam Phillips. Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC setting us up for Virginia Tech as the Hokies conclude spring practice and the spring game coming up in Blacksburg on April 22nd. Mike, appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, Mark.